Hello, 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 my great people. I will give this a few seconds for maybe a few minutes for people to come on and join. I am compelled to go on, to come on live. It's been a very long week for me. I'm grateful though. From work, from my work, which is my ministry. Um, a great body of work that has been given to me, handed to me through my ancestors, through those of my African ancestry, many of which whose names I do not know, uh, many of which I will never know by name or by face, but whose spirits are with me and consistently um, with me on this journey. I am so immensely grateful for the opportunities that I have been given to educate others, to liberate others, to liberate myself and my own thinking, my spirit, my emotions, um, in becoming a new creature. I always say this, and sometimes people laugh when they hear me say it, but I am in recovery from white supremacy and anti-Blackness. I truly am. And unless you have either read my book or read many of the books and authors that I refer to in my book, you will necessarily not understand what I am saying and be out of touch with what I am saying. Um, but I am grateful. I am so grateful for this journey. I don't know where it's taking me. I know where I've been, and I know that every step that I've taken has been a step of faith, true faith. I had the opportunity this week to present in St. Louis, Missouri, at the Facing Race conference, where I met some like-minded and like-hearted people, people that I've added to my family. Um, I'm thinking about my dear sister Shauna Lewis and a few others. My heart, uh, Marcel Walker, who is my absolute heart. Anyone who knows me, um, someone who has become a dear sister to me too, my sister Jessica. She wasn't here with me this week, but through our work together in developing and cultivating a very solid, long-lasting relationship, um, she has just poured into my life immensely and has allowed me to pour into hers, both personally and professionally. Um, in any case, I came on today and I wanted to allow some people to join in live stream before I proceeded. But I came on to share and really dissect a few videos, a few not just videos, but speeches and uh, conversations that feature several Black men that I uh, often use in my work. I use them in my courses. I use them in my pre-work, in uh, my syllabi for my courses. And it had been on my heart for quite some time to go live and really share these gems with all of you. So the first is a speech that James Baldwin gave in or around 1979 at UC Berkeley in California. Um, And I want you to listen to what he's saying in terms of how he characterizes the civil rights movement, the period that we refer to as the modern day civil rights movement, which is the period starting within the early to mid 1950s throughout the late 1960s. I would say anywhere from 1953, 1954 to 1968. And it's referred to as the civil rights period. The modern day civil rights period is because you have several pieces of key legislation, as well as a vital Supreme Court ruling that occurs in 1955. So the Brown v. Board of Education Supreme Court ruling in 1955. Then there's the Civil Rights Act of 1957, which didn't do much. And roughly 7 years later, there's the Civil Rights Act of 1964, the Voting Rights Act of 1965, and then the Federal Housing Act of 1968. So that period is referred to as a modern civil rights period or movement. So I want you to listen to how James Baldwin characterizes this period. And I must say that as a young boy being given James Baldwin's book, The Fire Next Time, that book literally changed my life. And James Baldwin has become and still remains very pivotal for me, a very pivotal and vital source. He is at the top of my list of role models and people that I respect in this work. So I know that much of my voice echoes his voice, as we are both. He was a Black gay man, I'm a Black gay man. And he was just fearless, and I appreciate him profoundly. So I'm going to share this video with you, and we can dissect it. We will dissect it together as I am sharing it. Okay? Here we go.
I want to suggest that instead of, as we have now for far too long, according to me, instead of speaking about the civil rights movement, which is an American phrase, which I'm going to go into in a moment, which upon examination means nothing at all. Let us pretend that I stand before you as a witness, and let us pretend that everyone under the sound of my voice is in the same condition. I'm a witness to and a survivor of the latest slave rebellion. I put it that way because Malcolm X and I met many years ago when Malcolm was doing a debate with a very young sit-in student, and Malcolm was a Black Muslim, and the radio station called me to moderate this discussion, which I did. I was not needed, I must tell you. Malcolm was one of the most beautiful and one of the most gentle men I met in all my life. He asked the boy a question, which I now present to you. If you are a citizen, why do you have to fight for your civil rights? If you're fighting for your civil rights, that means you're not a citizen. And in fact, the legality of this country, and I won't further investigate the word legality, has never had anything to do with its former slaves. We are still governed by the slave codes.
That's right.
Now, when I say a slave rebellion, I mean that what is called the civil rights movement was really insurrection. It was co-opted. Now the late J. Edgar Hoover is in his grave, God bless him. A lot of what I knew and many other people knew during those years, and only a fraction of what we knew during all those years, can now be more or less discussed. So one can say that the latest slave rebellion was brutally put down. We all know what happened to Medgar. And it was not some lunatic who happened to be wandering around Mississippi with a gun. The one lunatic in Mississippi at that moment happened to have a gun somewhere. And by some odd coincidence, unbelievable, shot Medgar Evers in the carport of his home in the sight and hearing of his wife and his children. And Medgar was 37. The lunatic was carried into the front door visibly of a nursing home and out the back door, and that was that. We all know what happened to Malcolm. We all know what happened to Martin. We know what happened to Fred Hampton and Mark Clark. And so many more. Honey, don't tell me. I mean, the list is long. That is the result of a slave rebellion. Now, I'm saying that since we are the survivors of it, since we have our children to raise, to save, I'm saying that to say a very brutal thing must be said. Must be said. The intentions of this melancholy country as concerns black people, and anyone who doubts me can ask any Indian, have always been genocidal.
This is so critically important in all of my work. And I have to tell you that when I wrote my book, start back in 2021, I had not yet seen this particular speech by James Baldwin. I had not known that he had spoken those words too. And so it was riveting for me, but it gave me great, great affirmation and confirmation that what I had studied, what I had analyzed and synthesized to create the courses that I teach, as well as write my book. So my analysis, everything that I say in my book, my first book, The 400-Year Holocaust, White America's Legal, Psychopathic, and Sociopathic Black Genocide, and the Revolt Against Critical Race Theory, it affirmed for me that my analysis and my assessment was accurate and was on point. I mean, I already knew that it was. And for those of you who understand and know that I was at the point of wanting to commit suicide at the time that I wrote my book, you understand that I had gotten to a place where I began to know and was very avowed in the fact that white people's intentions for Black people have always been genocidal, and that white America's intentions concerning Black people have always been to dehumanize us and for the purposes of their benefit, but that we are part of a gradual genocidal project where Black people are concerned. And so locating this speech by James Baldwin, which right now, as of this year, is roughly 45 years old, it gave me great confirmation, affirmation that I am not crazy and that my analysis is accurate. And so I'd love for those of you who are watching, I see that there are some people on, I can see that there are some people who have joined this live. Please share your comments and your thoughts about what I am saying, about what I just shared with you, the video that I shared with James Baldwin. I'm just very grateful. And I had to share this video with you, this clip. I would recommend that you YouTube it for yourself. It can be found on YouTube. Just type in James Baldwin, UC Berkeley, 1979. I'm also going to share now briefly a conversation that was being had in that same decade, roughly 8 years earlier, which featured Dr. John Henry Clark. This is another video that I share in my courses. I included as a part of my syllabus. And it also features a revolutionary man who was a minister, but also a Black activist by the name of Albert Clegg. So grateful to be here going live, because when I tell you I worked so hard this week at this conference, the Facing Race Conference. And by the way, I want to give a shout out to the Facing Race organization and a young Black woman by the name of Leslie Grant Spann, who is just phenomenal. If you don't know Leslie Grant Spann, just Google her, check her out, go and support the Facing Race organization. So this next clip that I'm going to share with you is from Tony Brown's Black Journal, which was a show that was on for maybe a few decades, definitely over a decade, the Black Journal. Actually, yeah, it was a few decades. I think it ran from either the 60s, the mid to late 60s into the 90s. But this episode was titled A Black Paper on White Racism. This is part one of a Black paper on white racism. Listen to what Dr. John Henry Clark had to say. All right, let me just cue this up for you. Here we go.
Now, look, let's deal with our own historical naivete. Until we deal with it, we're not going any place. Black people have no right to expect anything from this establishment because it wasn't set up for them. They wasn't brought to this country to be given democracy. They was brought to this country to do some work, to labor and to obey. And once the machines made a whole lot of these jobs obsolete, it tended to make a whole lot of the people obsolete. Now, we keep worrying about the American promise and the American dream, and we forget it wasn't made to us. And the white man has not betrayed anything because he didn't promise us anything in the first place. Now, the role of institutions in a society is to reflect the power that controls that society. So we have American institutions arrayed against us. And we naively expect these institutions to reform themselves, because if they reform themselves, that's tantamount to presiding over their own demise.
So it's so interesting because I talk to a lot of people, a lot of Black people who just cannot believe the moment we're in, and they cannot believe that we continue to, in their words, take a step backwards, as if the context of America, as if the objectives of America have ever changed, and the intentions of white America have ever changed concerning Black people. We have never been given our just due. And even though they might uplift and advance certain tokenized Negroes, such as, I was one of them. I have been one of them. I was one of them at a particular time in my life. I know many of them. Dr. E. Franklin Frazier speaks of them in his book, The Black Bourgeoisie. Those people I'm not really talking about, because those people I refer to as part of the free class of Black people. And I share that with the underlying fact and reality that America has always had a class of Black people that they considered free, and they were experiencing a very they had a very different status than those who were enslaved. And so I would consider those people nowadays the upper middle class and wealthy Black people who have aligned themselves with the power structure, who are gatekeepers of white supremacy. People such as Ben Carson, Clarence Thomas, Byron Donald, even some of the people that we might think who are celebrities are down with the cause and Black activists, but who are not really willing to risk much that would compromise their platform or their careers. Those people too. Those people, this type of message does not resonate with them or for them, because they're doing quite fine, and they feel like America has made progress because they've gotten somewhere. But I am sharing this message, and my platform is for the majority of Black people who understand the daily realities of our oppression here in white America and the ways that we are oppressed. And so Dr. John Henrik Clarke, he says that we have no right to really expect anything from this establishment because it was not meant for us. And if you understand the history of this place, Black people were brought here as exploitative human beings in to be subjected to the worst form of exploitation. And so this wondering of, we're taking 2 steps or 3 steps backwards. No, we're not. We're experiencing the context and what was intended for Black people in America. And that was, there may be 1 or 2 tokens, just like there is for every group. There may be 1 or 2 tokens for every 10,000 of us. But it does not, they do not represent the reality of the ways in which Black people, for the most part, are subjected to white supremacy and experience anti-Blackness. This is an anti-Black culture. We must understand that now and through the duration of our presence and existence here in this society. And so he says, we were brought to this country to do some work, to labor and to obey. And that is our place here in this society. James Baldwin, in the clip that I just showed you, he says, America's intentions for Black people have always been genocidal, Once we were freed from our enslavement, we transferred from being an asset of white America because we were a free labor force. We were instantly transferred from being an asset to America, to the business model of America, to being a liability. We became a liability. We have excess people here. And now that we can no longer benefit from their free labor, we need to find a way to get rid of them. And so America's intentions concerning Black people have always been genocidal from the moment that they enacted the 13th Amendment, which freed over 3.9 million enslaved African people. And I think it's so vital that we understand the inhumanity of America, which is why I put some notes in the body of this post outlining psychopathic disorder, psychopathic behavioral disorder, a psychopathic personality disorder. So I'm going to share another video with you too, because I want to make my last point before I end this live. In this video, this clip rather, features the next gentleman that I spoke about Albert Clegg, who was just powerful. Albert Clegg was dynamic. So please listen, learn, share, and also share your thoughts in the comments. Drop some thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. Here we go.
We need to look at what kind of societies did Black people come out of.
Actually, that was the wrong one. I have so many clips queued up. Bear with me. All right, here we go. I'll come back to that clip in a second because I do want to play that last clip by Dr. John Henry Clark. All right, here's the clip from Albert Clegg.
I'd like to say one thing on that. I think the question you asked is how do the schools accomplish this? I mean, you were concerned about the process. I think we got to understand that there's no such thing as objective truth, which is implicit in everything Dr. Clark says, that white people use the institutions to accomplish white purpose. The white purpose is to maintain a power position and keep everybody else in a subordinate, powerless kind of position. Now that's the institution's purpose, and that's the way it functions and how it functions. And we got to realize then that everything that the schools teach is designed to fit into that purpose. The schools teach not objective truth, but what the white man wants to project as truth. Now that's from the very kindergarten right straight on through.
For example, what?
Sociology. Sociology is not a science in the sense that it's dealing objectively with the way people live together. It's dealing with the white man's pattern of living together as the norm by which we judge how other people live. If you live like white people live, then you're living the way you are supposed to live. If not, you're either primitive or insane as a people. Psychologically, it's the same thing. Psychology does not deal with any objective kind of discussion or development of how people live or analysis of how people function as individuals, but how does the white man function? If the white man does it this way, then this is the norm by which we judge all other people. If the white man is violent, then actually all people have to be violent to be normal. If you're not violent, obviously there's something wrong with you and you should be in an insane asylum. The whole pattern that's set up as a norm for human behavior by psychologists, the whole library full of it. Psychiatrists, everybody that's dealing with it is dealing with it from a white point of view. So they teach white children, black children and white children, to look through white eyes. From the kindergarten on, the black child is beginning to look at the world and interpret it through white eyes. Everything he is wrong. Everything that exists in his community is wrong. And we ought to declare.
So we have to understand that we, all of us here in America who exist under white rulership, and so everything that we are, the ways that we know ourselves, the way that we know other people, the way that we experience other people and make meaning, the way that we define ourselves, our value systems are modeled after what white people have sanctioned as valuable, as important. We exist by and possess the inherent same logic as our rulers, as the people who have ruled us and oppressed us for centuries. And so we have to understand that we're all looking through white eyes. And I chuckle sometimes when I see Black people who are often offended by people who say they've been told that they act white, that they talk white or act white, and they get upset. You know, I can't believe they said that about me. Well, you are acting white. You are, because you know no existence without the domination and rulership of white people. And I think it is critically important to begin to investigate the ways that we link our value to this very depraved and brutal culture. So much so that the very offspring that comes from our bodies many times, as we send our children to these schools, when they start not to perform well in white American educational institutions, we devalue them. We begin to feel that our children are deficient based on the grades that they received through and by and from institutions that are intended to oppress them. And so we tie it directly to their self-worth. Many times, some children are subjected to punishments. Parents' attitudes change towards their children based on how well they do or do not perform in white American educational institutions. And we have to understand then that all of our experiences here are set up to keep us distracted, but to keep us divided. These institutions are inherently anti-Black, and therefore they will have you hating your children. They will have you hating your parents. They will have you hating Black women. They will have you hating Black girls. They will have you hating Black boys. They will have you hating Black men. They have caused us so much division. And Black people as a race of people, I'm very clear about this. We do not know ourselves and a presence as a community without the existence of trauma. We were made Black by our oppressors. We didn't choose that as a label for ourselves. And we were made Black for the purposes of confining us to an identity that they defined as most inferior. And so we have to do a lot of decolonizing our minds through reading and listening to Black revolutionary teachers, not these people who put up a facade as revolutionaries, but some real Black revolutionaries who were willing to put everything on the line. That's who we need to be listening to. The Dr. Bobby Wright, as I mentioned many times, Dr. Amos Wilson, Dr. W.E.B. Du Bois, Frances Cress Welsing, Dr. Frances Cress Welsing with her color confrontation theory, she put it all on the line. She was fired from Howard University in 1974 because she wrote a paper saying that white people believed that they were inherently genetically inferior. That's the color confrontation theory. So these are the people who have informed my work, who have informed my life. These are my ministers of philosophy. And so I sit here today just, sharing these reflections with you, exposing you to some of these resources, because it's important that we wake up, that we truly wake up and understand the harm that we have been subjected to historically, as well as the harm that we continue to not only be exposed to, but that we have been programmed to perpetrate onto each other. And so I also want to say this, and I said this in one of my last lives, that as Black people, we have no allies here. And some of the people who are not our allies, who are suffer from anti-Blackness, are Black people. We have been programmed to be inherently anti-Black. And so therefore, we can't even look to each other sometimes as sources of support, because in the system of white supremacy, what I know to be true is that everyone has a price tag. And if you're not willing to die versus being subjected to subjecting your brother and sister, your Black brothers and sisters, to harm, and you would be willing to acquiesce to white supremacy, to be given position and place in this genocidal project, then you too have a price tag. And so we're isolated. We're isolated by non-white people. We're isolated by white people, and we are isolated by Black people. We do not have any allies, and I'm very clear about that, based on, again, my analysis and my assessment of the problem as it stands and persists. So this last clip I'm going to share with you does feature some additional reflections by Dr. John Henrik Clarke. And I'm going to end with this clip. I love these men and the women that I named, Toni Morrison. I love them immensely. And I'm just so grateful to be carrying forward a work that I know that I've been handed. Even as I am tired and fatigued in my body today, after having presented at the Facing Race conference this week and meeting hundreds of people who I had the opportunity to introduce to my work, I was compelled, and it was put in my spirit to get on here tonight and to bring forth this message to you. So I will share this last clip, and thank you so much for being with me. All right, here we go. Let me just back this up. Few seconds.
Societies that black people come out of. What happened before this interference? Now, we came out of basic pluralistic societies, but we came out of sharing societies where nobody was very rich and nobody at all was poor. Now, an African in this society would no more kill a deer and say, this is mine, and he would fly, because he didn't think that way. He thought of all property as belonging to the total community. Now, we were brought into a society as slaves just at the time the concept of private property and capitalism was getting well underway with the backing of the church. Now, there is a clash between the values of, the best values of the society we came out of and the society that enslaved us. And too many of us are tied up with these values, the sacredness of private property. What is so sacred about private property? What is so sacred about one man taking upon himself more than he could use in a lifetime while people walking by this mountain of wealth starving? Nothing particularly sacred about this. And these things did not exist in these old societies until these old societies began to have internal differences, and the European came in, and the African naively permitted him to arbitrate an African family dispute until we understand that up on site, the African invited the European for dinner. That's the first thing he did. The Indian invited the European for dinner. The Polynesians invited the European for dinner. Now, if you invite people for dinner, first place, you've got plenty of dinner, and you have a society that is traditionally hospitable to strangers. The Indians invited Christopher Columbus for dinner, the first thing they did. All right, now let's look at what was happening inside of Christopher Columbus's mind, and we can go to his own diary for this. He said, I wonder why they are so friendly. They'll be easier to conquer than I thought they would be. I wonder why they're bringing such small amounts of gold. I wonder where the mines are. His intentions were not good. It wasn't good then. The intentions are not good now. And the black man is still hung up with this dinner invitation, this kindness, with the thought that if you treat a person humanely, that he would act humanely toward you. Black people have not seen white people at all. That is why they can't deal with them.
I want to say one.
Woo! Please share your thoughts. I also want to say, if you have not yet gone to Diagnosing Whiteness and Anti-Blackness.com, go there and begin a healing journey. The intentions. What are America's intentions for Black people as a collective race? What are the intentions that they have for themselves when they are willing to subject their own women, white women, to the atrocities of being required to carry to term the babies of their rapists? They require that of Black women. They're now requiring that of all women across 13 states in this country that have passed laws that make no exceptions for rape or incest. So what are the intent? We have to understand the inhumanity that began to take flight as white people were developing as a culture, as a group. When you create laws that say that you can just outright commit genocide against indigenous people, that you can outright create genocide and commit genocide and murder Black people, per the Casual Killing Act of 1669, a litany of other laws, thousands upon thousands of laws that give the right to rape Black women, to murder Black boys, to murder Black girls. What happens psychologically within a people? And I think we have to really investigate what is going on here. Because even this week, I was teaching a course, and one of the Black women in the course, she just kept looking for white people to feel some type of remorse or emotionality about the material that we were covering in the course. And it was very hard material. It really was. And it was riveting for the Black people who were a part of the course. And people were crying. I was crying. I was just entirely disturbed and upset. And, this woman kept looking for these white people to connect with it and to be emotionally affected. And they weren't, for the most part. And, one of the white women spoke up and she goes, this is part of our psychopathic personality disorder. We really are disconnected from Black humanity because we really don't feel any two ways about the experiences and the atrocities that Black people have been subjected to in the past, historically, and we don't feel anything now. And I asked for many other of the white people who are in the group, who are taking the course right now, to admit to whether they agreed and could relate to what this one white woman had said, and most, if not all of them, raised their hand. And so we have to understand that as the daily atrocities are happening to Black people, that white people were trained, their humanity was trained out of them. Where Black people are concerned, I am very clear of it. And so much of that disorder has been transferred into us. You have other Black people that at the sight and at hearing what their family members and or friends, people in their friend circle, or people in the larger community are being exposed to in terms of daily terrorism, that they feel no two ways about it. And it's, that person is doing too much, or they need to just get over it. There's no empathy or compassion in this culture for Black people. And so I want to end on this note. Again, if you have not gone to Diagnosing Whiteness and Anti-Blackness.com, go there after this live is over. Go to the watch screen, and you will get access to a 10-part episodic docuseries that is there for your learning pleasure and journey. I've priced each episode as low as I possibly can so that it can be accessible to people. But I want us to understand what we are dealing with. And I'm going to end with this clip. As some of you have heard me mention, as I always do, Dr. Bobby Wright, he is a staple in my work. His work around the psychopathic racial personality. This man is a staple in my work. He really opened my eyes to some things that I had never thought about before after reading his papers. And if you haven't read his work, it's not that long. You can go to Amazon right now and order this. You can order this book. It's really a pamphlet. It's got maybe 4 to 5, 6 different papers in it. But he writes about the psychopathic racial personality. And Dr. Wright says, in their relationship with the Black race, whites are psychopathic, whites are psychopaths. And all you have to do is study their history. Dr. Wright says their behavior represents an underlying biologically transmitted proclivity with roots deep in their evolutionary history. He's talking about a DNA transference, behavioral traits, attitudinal traits, cultural traits that have been transcended, passed down generation by generation due to their socialization, the way that socialization has transformed and impacted their psychological state, right? He says in their relationship with the Black race, he's speaking specifically with the social cultural relations between white and Black people. In their relationship with the Black race, whites are psychopaths, and their behavior represents an underlying biologically transmitted proclivity with roots deep in their evolutionary history. The psychopath is an individual who is constantly in conflict with other persons or groups. He is unable to experience guilt, is completely selfish and callous, and has a total disregard, not just some, a total disregard for the rights of others. And people wonder why we're at war today. A total disregard for the rights of others. One of the best methods that can be used to measure the psychopathic traits of the white race is observing and analyzing their universal overt behaviors and attitudes towards Blacks. Here's what's important though, because if white people throughout their evolutionary history as subjects here in a terroristic white supremacist state, a terroristic white supremacist continent, country, environment, if they have been socialized and trained to become psychopathic, what does this mean for the entirety of the Black race and Black people who have been socialized and ruled by white people in white institutions? We value everything that they value. Every measure of worth that we have for how we deem ourselves important or valuable is through a Eurocentric standard or measuring stick. And so if they have been trained and programmed to be anti-Black and psychopathic where Black people are concerned, guess what? We have been too. And that is what I am saying in my book. Dr. Wright says psychopaths simply ignore the concept of right and wrong. By ignoring this trait in the white race, the lack of ethical and moral development, Blacks have made and are still making a tragic mistake in basing the worldwide Black liberation movement on moral suasion. It is pathological for Blacks. You are sick, Black people, if you keep attempting to use moral suasion on a people who have no morality, where race is the variable. And so if this is true for white people, this is true for everyone who is ruled by white people who have bought into the facade of white supremacy, the terrorism that is America. This is true for Black people too. We have been programmed to be psychopathic towards Black people. And there's a lot of deep healing, a lot of deep psychological, emotional, and spiritual healing that needs to take place if we ever want to learn techniques and strategies so that we can resist the terrorism and the genocide that we are perpetrating onto each other as Black people. And I'm going to end there. Thank you, everybody, for those of you who have tuned into this live, and for those of you who will be seeing this video later on. Go and hug your mother. Go and hug your sisters. Go and hug your brother. Just hold them by the hand. Go and hug your Black son and daughter, and do not let them go. Just hug them and begin praying for them. And you pray for yourself too. Not to the God that we've been given, this white idea of a God or Jesus that we've been given, but pray to your higher power that you can access some liberation, some healing, and some liberation, mental liberation, spiritual liberation, emotional liberation, because that is what we need, and that is what we are going to need to continue to try and cope through this genocidal project and adventure that we are involved in. I love you.